Before the bells, before the psalms, before the first gray light through the shutter, there is a question I am asked more than any other. What did we drink in the quiet hour before dawn to carry us through what the day asked of us? I will tell you, but first, you should understand what we did not have. We did not have your coffee. No dark roasted bean, no bitter cup steaming on a table. That drink did not sit in our kitchens, in our storerooms, in our hands before prayer. It had not yet crossed the sea to reach a monastery like mine, and would not for many lifetimes after the one I am remembering now. And yet the hours before dawn were long, and the work after them longer still. Something carried us through those hours. Something plain, something old, something that came not from a foreign harbor but from our own hives, standing at the edge of the garden wall. Picture the hour, if you can. No lamps yet lit beyond a single candle in the passage. The stone floor cold enough to ache through a sandal. A young brother, half asleep still, fumbling at the well rope while the older ones stood waiting, saying nothing, because there was nothing yet to say at that hour. That is the hour I am speaking of. Not a comfortable one, not one that forgives a weak body. I am Brother Anselm. Sit with me a while, and I will tell you what it was, and why we trusted it, and what I think the world has lost in trading it for what is drunk now. Scripture speaks of it more than you may remember. The land itself was promised as one flowing with milk and honey, the sweetness of it woven into the very idea of a place worth reaching. The wanderer in the wilderness was sustained on locusts and wild honey when there was little else to be found in that dry country. The wise man in Proverbs called it sweetness for the soul, pleasant to the taste, good for the bones. Even the Psalms reach for it, as their measure of what is good, sweeter than honey, and the honeycomb, they say, when speaking of something worth treasuring. It was not a luxury in our house. It was simply there, steady, humble, always within reach of the hand. Long before any of us wore this habit, before there was a rule to follow or a bell to call us, men were already gathering honey from wild combs in the rock. There are paintings on stone walls older than memory itself, showing a man climbing toward a hollow in a cliff face, reaching past the swarm for what waited inside. It is, I am told, among the oldest foods known to any people in any land. The old Egyptians set jars of it beside their dead, sealed into tombs meant to last forever, and when those tombs were opened again after thousands of years, the honey within had not spoiled. It had simply waited, sweet as the day it was sealed. I do not know all the reasons for that. I only know it says something about the thing itself, that it does not rot the way lesser things do, and perhaps that is part of why it was trusted for so long, by so many, long before any of us were born to trust it too. There is an old story, too, of a strong man who found a swarm and a sweetness where no one expected either in the carcass of a lion he had killed with his bare hands. He made a riddle of it for his wedding guests. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strength came something sweet. None of them could answer him. I think of that riddle sometimes on cold mornings, how the sweetest things so often come from the hardest places, and how even a strong man still needed something small and simple to sustain him. It was not only the men of Scripture and the Nile who trusted it so. The old philosophers of Greece called it a gift from the gods, given by the bees rather than earned by the sowing of any man's field. Physicians of the ancient world, long before any of ours, reached for a spoonful of it when a patient needed strength rather than medicine. Though I will say again, as I will say once more before I am through, that this was never a cure, only a comfort, and there is an old wisdom in knowing the difference between the two. But patience, friend, before I tell you exactly how the cup was made, let me first tell you why we needed it at all, because I think you will find your own mornings are not so different from ours. The hours before dawn are the hardest hours. The body does not want to rise. The mind is heavy, the limbs are slow, and yet the day does not wait for a man to feel ready. We rose all the same, in the dark, in the cold stone halls, and walked to the chapel long before the sun had any thought of showing itself. There was no time for a long meal at that hour. There was barely time to stand at the well. There was the barn to see to before any of that. Animals who did not care what hour it was. Wood to be split if the night had been cold. Water to be drawn before the light was strong enough to see the bottom of the well clearly. The work did not wait politely for a man to feel ready for it, and neither did the bell. The garden kept bees, as most such gardens did, tucked along the far wall where the morning sun reached first. It was not unusual work for a monastery. Brothers have kept hives for longer than any of us can trace, for the wax as much as the honey, since a chapel needs candles as surely as it needs prayer, and a hive gives both from the same quiet labor. There is an old teaching, too, that the bees themselves were a kind of lesson, each one small, each one plain, and yet together building something ordered and lasting, without a single one of them understanding the whole of what they built. A monastery is not so different, if I am honest with you. The hives gave us more than sweetness for feast days. They gave us something to carry in the hand on the walk to prayer, when the stomach was empty and the road was cold. So this is what we did. And it was no great secret, only a small habit repeated every morning of every year. A cup of water, warmed a little if the season was cruel, a spoonful of honey, stirred until it had disappeared into the water entirely. Sometimes, if the pantry allowed it, a small measure of something sour, a little vinegar perhaps, or whatever fruit had turned in the cellar just enough to wake the tongue on a dull morning. That was all. No grinding, no roasting, no long preparation over a fire. A monk does not have time for ceremony before dawn prayers, and the rule we lived by did not ask for one. And it worked, in its plain way. The honey gave the body something it could use quickly, a simple sweetness the blood could carry almost at once, long before the porridge and bread of the later meal had time to do their slower work. We did not have the word for it then. We only knew, morning after morning, that the cup steadied us, and the walk to chapel felt less like a battle fought against our own bodies. An old brother once told me, when I was still new to that cold hour myself, that the cup was not for strength of the kind a soldier needs, but for steadiness enough to stand upright through the psalms, enough to keep the mind from wandering toward the warmth of the bed it had just left. I remember the particular quiet of those mornings. The cup passed hand to hand in the near dark, no one speaking above a whisper, the faint scent of the hive still clinging to the honey, even after it had disappeared entirely into the water. The learned men have studied honey since those days, and they have found, in their own careful way, much of what we trusted by instinct alone, that a simple sugar taken into an empty body does its work swiftly, before anything heavier has time to settle. I will not stand here and tell you it is a cure for anything, or that it replaces what a body truly needs, which is rest, and food in its season, and prayer at its proper hour. It was never meant to replace those things. It was only ever meant to carry a man the short distance between waking and the first hour of real light. That, I think, is the part that has been lost, not the honey itself. You can find honey easily enough in any market, in any season of the year. What has been lost is the plainness of it. We did not dress the cup up with promises. We did not call it a miracle, or a secret kept from you, or a cure hiding on a shelf. It was simply what we had, and we trusted it because it was simple, and because it had been trusted by those who came before us and by their fathers before them, back further than any of us could count. Consider how strange it would have seemed to those old brothers to see a shelf lined with bottles and tins, each one shouting louder than the last about what it could do for you. They had one small jar by the window, and they never once thought to ask more of it than it could honestly give. There is a kind of peace in that, I think, in trusting a thing precisely as much as it deserves and no more. I wonder sometimes what those old brothers would make of your modern shelves, lined with bottles each shouting louder than the last, not with scorn, I think, but with a quiet bewilderment, the way a man might look upon a feast when he has only ever known a crust of bread, and found that crust enough. You do not need my cup to face your morning. I am not asking you to trade your coffee for honey and water, as though one were righteous and the other a small sin that was never the lesson, and I would be a poor monk if I pretended it was. The lesson is smaller than that, and I think harder to hear. It is only this: we have forgotten how to be satisfied with something plain. We reach for what promises the most, the strongest, the fastest cup, when sometimes the old humble thing was enough all along, and asked for nothing but a spoonful from the hive and a little patience at the well. So when you rise tomorrow, before the world has asked anything of you yet, perhaps you will think of the cup we made in that cold hour, warm water, a little honey, nothing more, and wonder whether your own morning needs quite so much dressing up as you have given it. The door of this house is always open. Come and sit with me again whenever you wish.